Hey, hey, what's good, family? Welcome to yet another edition of Smart Church at Noon. In fact, this is the February 7th edition of our sharing together at this noon hour, a time when we said we would just come together for a few weeks and look at this. It's some years later, and we are still at it. I certainly appreciate and want to share my gratitude with every one of you. Thank you, Brother Donald. Every one of you who has been constant and consistent with us, for you have truly built a community that keeps growing. So thank you so very much for sharing what we do here and how we, and as a young, excuse me, as the young people would say, how we roll here. Certainly, if you are a first time visitor, we want to recognize you. If you want us to know that you are in with us, just type your name in the chat box and we will certainly recognize you. Welcome to this space. You'll see that it's a little different, and yet we all leave here smarter because we shared with one another. We try to make sure that everybody has a voice. I am not a lecturer. I merely facilitate the conversation as we teach one another. So you want to pay close attention to what's happening in the chat box because that's where the real lessons are learned. For all of our rebroadcast crowd, what can we say? You are at the tops of our hearts and minds because we know that you have to make a special effort to be with us. And no doubt you are special to us in the manner that you fit us into your schedule. So if you would get your sacred scripture ready and together and your note taking apparatus, we're going to look at the book of Second Chronicles. That's the one in the Old Testament. Second Chronicles chapter 31, verses 2 through 4. Not Corinthians. If you like me, I get confused with those two. Not Second Corinthians, Second Chronicles chapter 31, verses 2 through 4. If you go to Corinthians, you will notice that Second Corinthians does not have 31 chapters. So you'll want to go back to the Old Testament. Second Chronicles chapter 31, verses 2 through 4 calls our attention. We're still talking about why I love the Black church. And today we're going to talk about building institutions. And of course, you are, as a child of God, a person, human being. You are the first institution that God builds, and it goes from there. And I am of the opinion that John was right when he said, "It does not yet appear what we shall be." So I think the building process is continual with us. God is not finished with us. The elders taught us to say. Second Chronicles chapter 31, verses 2 through 4. I'll read from the New International Version. Hezekiah assigned the priests and the Levites to divisions, each of them according to their duties as priests or Levites, to offer burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, to minister, to give thanks, and to sing praises at the gates of the Lord's dwelling. The king contributed from his own possessions for the morning and evening burnt offerings, and for the burnt offerings on the Sabbaths, at the new moons, and at the appointed festivals, as written in the law of the Lord. He ordered the people living in Jerusalem to give the portion due to the priests and Levites so they could devote themselves to the law of the Lord. That's the reading of God's holy and unchangeable words. Thank you, Brother Eddie, for putting our scripture in. So, of course, we're situated in what scholars call the history books. When you look at First, Second Samuel, First, Second Kings, First, Second Chronicles, we are told the history of the people of God through the lens, or the frame is a better word, through the frame of the royalty, the kings that ascended and died and descended. And not only so, we are given a look at the politics of the region. So let me go back. We in the history books, from the Samuels to the ends of the Chronicles, we get a look at not only the history of Israel uh, through the frame of the kings, but we also get a view of the politics of the region in which uh, Israel was situated. And no doubt, politics played an important role. Israel rose and Israel fell according to their relationship with God. Israel had power when David and Solomon were the kings, right? Probably their most prominent period. But Israel had also had some very low times as well. Remember, Israel went through its own civil war and was divided 10 tribes against 2 tribes, the northern and the southern regions. Uh, I bring the matter to your attention because we get a picture with the politics of it all. We get a picture of the world around Israel, right? As Israel is not out there in a vacuum like we would be led to believe in reading the Bible if we are not careful. You got to be careful to realize that Israel is not only just one nation, it is one of the smaller nations in that region, in the Mediterranean world at the time. Same as today, right? Israel is a small nation. But what jumped out to me is that we would think that Israel was the biggest and the baddest all the time, but that's not necessarily so. There were other nations. You already know that Israel constantly found itself living under the stress and the strain of being conquered and occupied. And if they were not occupied, then they were living in the wilderness of somebody else's land. It brought attention to me that I have to watch myself, and perhaps you will see the same. That it's awfully arrogant of humans to think that we are the center of everything. When you think about the vast expanse of God's creation, right? Not even the earth is the center of God's creation. This thing that we call a globe, when you think about the expanse of the universes that are out there, and to think that everything moves because we say it moves, or stand still, that is just not necessarily so. There's probably more about our existence that we don't know, have never experienced, and possibly will never experience until we transition uh, uh, than there is what we know about ourselves. So never forget that our God is so big, right? Our God is so big that God created not one universe, but plural universes. And there is no possible way that we can think as humans on one globe called the earth that we are the biggest and baddest of everything. It ought to make us humble, to be honest with you. We ought to be humble that God would include us in God's plan when you consider all that God has created. So let's narrow down. I know that was a lot. Let's narrow down to our particular text. The king is Hezekiah. Hezekiah that Isaiah went around and round with. Hezekiah has risen to the throne. His father was Ahaz, who was the king, Ahaz, who was the king before him, and his mother's name was Abijah. Ahab, now let me back up. Hezekiah, unlike his father Ahaz, I'm gonna get it together. Stay with me. Hezekiah, unlike his father Ahaz, is on the Lord's side. And so Hezekiah rises to the throne, and he begins to just create a multitude of reforms among the people in order that the people might draw closer to God or go back to God And you already know when you go back to God, then you really get back to your true self. And um, so what we find as Ahaz, shucks, I'm gonna get it together. As Hezekiah begins to put these reforms in place, that Israel grows stronger and stronger because you know, and I know this is kind of trivial for some, but you already know that our strength comes from God. And when you're away from God, then you are probably more weak than you realize. So, before Hezekiah goes to the throne, there are all kinds of laws and all kinds of policies enacted that work against the good of the people. The people, led by others, are going to foreign gods and creating altars and totems for foreign gods. And Hezekiah comes through. He's trying to destroy all of that. It lets us know right before Hezekiah all of these things were legal, but they were not right. I want you to put that part in your notes because everything that is legal is not necessarily right or righteous in the eyes of God. You got to think about some of the laws that you have lived through that were a part of the code, right, of the legal code, but they were not righteous. They did not lead to your construction. In fact, if one persists, they would lead to our destruction. Think about it. Well, the easy one for us is slavery, right? Slavery was legal. Jim Crow, Jim and Jane Crow, um, that was legal, separate but equal. That was legal straight from the Supreme Court. If you look at what's happening today, the way uh, people put their lives in danger. They're putting barbed wire and razor wire into the Rio Grande to to not only dissuade but also to cause harm and damage and maybe even death to people who are just trying to come back into the land that their ancestors owned. Right. So at the border of Texas, you got people so-called protecting stolen land, the way we treat the immigrants, so-called immigrants, because they're humans. All of that stuff, all of that stuff is legal. Look at what's happening now to the destruction of poor people's communities, with the way that chemicals are pushed in our community, um, the alcohol and all of that kind of stuff in our community, and now put on top of that legalized gambling. Now, I'm not judging anybody, but I do recognize that when these deviant behaviors are made legal, the gambling, the chemicals that people put in their body to try to cope with life, that takes a devastating effect on our communities, right? Poor people have the means that they can somehow get around, and if they get caught up, get hooked, they can go somewhere and get corrected. But in our communities, it is straight destruction. But it is all legal. Some of you have been around long enough that when Governor Edwin Edwards, said that he wanted gambling in our state to bring the riverboats in, all the money, the proceeds would go to education. And that was a lie, right? Ain't now money going to education now. So that all of that stuff moves to destroy the people that or to destroy communities of people that can least afford to go through that kind of damage. So check again. We're still looking at Hezekiah. I'm still checking the chat box because I know you guys are going to start teaching in a moment. Hezekiah, in his reforms, gives us a how to and the importance of building institutions. And when we get to the conversation tonight about the Black church's role in building institutions. This is really going to come together for you. If you think about it, that is one of the ways that the Black church is known throughout its history, from the times when they had to meet in secret in the brush harbors all the way to today. The Black church's contribution to society is in the manner that it built institutions. Think about the benevolent clubs that came out of the Black church, the schools, some of them now universities that came out of the Black church, the societies that came out of, like the fellowship type societies that came out of Black church, uh, insurance agencies, banks. I mean, you name it. All of these institutions that made it better for our people came out of the Black church. The Black church supplied a place for meeting space, right? And if you look at the older churches, they supplied a place for entertainment, so that people were not out in them streets. And so all of that, we'll get to it later this evening. But for today, what we're looking at is the fact that Hezekiah uh, instituted, in trying to bring the people back to God and thus back to themselves. He showed us the importance of having institutions. Sister Beatrice Ross says the chemical company owners do not live in this state, but they have an open invitation to kill the citizens, especially Black communities, to pollute the air. Right on target, sis. Right on target. That's exactly what we're talking about. If you look at how our communities, the ones that can at least afford it, are the ones that are attacked the most. So Hezekiah, when we read about how he appoints people, and the text goes from the priests to the Levites to everybody, right? Everybody living in Jerusalem. What he lets us know is that if every one of us has a role to play. I don't want you to forget that, because there are too many who are in our community, and when I say that, I mean our faith community, who sit but don't get involved, especially uh, in the efforts to minister to people, in the efforts to meet people's needs. Too many sit idly by, I would dare say, without thinking that they have something to contribute. And that's where we come in, because we are having this conversation. Now you can encourage others. We can encourage others together that, hey, I don't know what your gift or your talent is, but I want you to know that you have something to contribute from in any part of the effort. If you're not strong, right, your hands are hurting, your health is not what it needs to be, then certainly we can use some administrative skills. If you don't have the administrative skills, then certainly we can use your wisdom in how to get things done without hurting ourselves or without working ourselves to death. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So the point is, though, when we are told about Hezekiah, including everybody, it lets us know and reminds many of us that every one of us has to contribute in order for things to work that they ought. We say that a lot of times when we have special giving campaigns, or we're trying to reach certain goals with finances. We try to be careful to say it is not how much, right? Especially if you don't have it. The goal is to get everybody to participate. We don't want to get stuck on finances, so let's think about something else. If we have to pick up a table, let's use that. If we have to pick up a table, if 10 people come together to pick up the table, rather than one person struggling with the table, somebody just taught me that. Won't that make that better, right? It'll be easier to maneuver. I don't know who taught me that, but shout out to you and thank you for teaching me. Um, so yeah, Hezekiah includes everybody. That takes us back, and I'll bring this up later this evening. That takes us back to our discussion last year of the spiritual gifts. God gives everybody something to contribute. It can be the hands on, or it can be the ethereal, but everybody has something to bring to the table. Sister Lucille Bazille, we all have some gifts as of Black people. Yeah. All we need to do is put it together as God's people. Couldn't have said it better. Put it together. And I love the way you describe us as God's people. You really want to get that one in your notes, sisters and brothers. That's the one right there. That is the one. I don't know if you saw the Bernie Mac joke, that guy trying to get into heaven, but his background was a little sketchy. And so someone told him the way to get into heaven then is you have to ask God a question that God can't answer. And so the guy goes and whispers in God's ear the question, and God just says, open the gates. I can't answer that question. And so the guy coming after that brother asked, "This don't make sense. How did he get into heaven? I thought God knew everything." And the answer, God said, He asked me when Black people gonna come together. Now I know that's a joke. I know God knows everything. But what Sister Bazille brought up is the $1,000,000 answer. Boy, if we could ever get us together, we will turn this world the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, all of us have something to contribute, because like Sister just taught us, God gives everybody gifts. Everybody has something to contribute. All right. So Hezekiah specifically calls out the priest and the Levites. Here's the interesting thing, and it's going to feed right into what Sister Lucille just taught us. The priest, they were mostly in charge of, yes, it does. Yes, ma'am. Um, the priests were basically in charge of the word, right? They studied the word, they copied the word, they disseminated the word. And when I say the word, I mean what we call the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. So the priest in the temple, their work mostly surrounded the word, but uh, they also they also worked around the altar when people brought their sacrifices to the altar. So that's their role in the temple, in the faith community. Now the Levites' job was the liturgy, or what we would call an order of service. They made sure the service went the way it was supposed to do. But the Levites also, right, they were singers. You can go check out the Psalms for that, particularly the prefaces of the Psalms. Uh, the Levites provided security, and the Levites worked with the money. And so you have the priests in there. They're making sure the word is right, and then they're taking sacrifices and offering sacrifices. The Levites are the people singing. They're making sure the worship service goes the way it's supposed to. They offer security, right? They're standing at the doors, and they're making sure the money is right. Now, what's a trip is that work in um, both groups work in the temple, God's house, right? But there was normally tension between the groups, right? They ain't really care for one another. They were opposites of one another in their minds. Both groups, now get that, both groups work in the temple of God, but there was usually or normally tension between the two groups. And you probably already guessed it. The tension or the strain between the two groups was usually about who is most important. Now, I know that doesn't sound familiar to you, those of you who've been around the church. Think about that. Both charged with keeping the temple going, making sure that things were right in God's house, and yet they could not get along with one another. That makes you shake your head. But, or until you remember, a lot of that still happens in the church today. But a sign of maturity, I dare say, well, one, try to get over it. But two, uh, the sign of maturity that we see through the Levites and the priests is that the temple never stopped. They may have had their little personal beefs or whatever it was, but the work of the temple never stopped. It lets us know, right, that we're not going to all agree with one another all the time, but we can be mature enough to put our differences aside to make sure that we are all doing the work that God has assigned us. That's a whole lot, because every one of us are mere humans who get disturbed, disgusted, frustrated, right? People will do things, and sometimes they don't even know they do it. And let's tell the truth, church people can be cruel, but our charge is to stay out of our feelings, to make sure that God's church moves forward, that God's faith community is progressing and is productive, that God, we talked about that last week with Jesus, that God's church is God's church, not our church, that God's church continues to do what God has assigned us. Brother Donald Lewis says we can agree to disagree. Yes, exactly. But let's push that a little bit further. Can we, as people of God, disciples of the living Christ, can we somehow find a way to agree to agree? Yeah, we're going to have our differences. Brother Donald is absolutely right. But Matthew chapter 18 says that sometimes you have to push to try to agree with one another. And then if you can't find agreement, well, that's when you go through the processes of going to the church and so forth. But imagine how powerful we would be if we say, okay, let's try to find some common ground among one another. And we can start with the resurrection of our sable-skinned Savior and move from there. So check. The Levites and the priests did not get along with one another, but the work continued. All right. If you still have your sacred scripture open, you can look at verse 2 that says that Hezekiah set the people, or appointed the people according to their divisions, each man according to his service. That gives us a description, right? The assignment is uh, that they were divided, but they were divided according to each person's service. So here's the key to building institutions among us, religious and otherwise, is to make sure to put the right people in the right place at the right time. Now, we can talk institution, but all of us should be able to do that in our personal space as well. For instance, if you're going through something, that's not the time to have your friend that don't find nothing good in anything in your presence. That's not the time to talk to them. That's not the time to at least not have them at the forefront and talking to you every day, right? If you're trying to climb out of something, that's not the time to be listening to the one that ain't never been through what you going through. That's not the time, right? It's about having the right people in the right spaces at the right time. If you're taking note, then put this one in your notes. First Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32. First Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, one of my favorite passages of scripture, talks about the sons of Issachar who knew the time and knew what to do. Who knew the time and knew what to do, right? That's the way we should conduct our personal lives. And as it comes, right, you don't want to put somebody in charge of construction project that knows nothing about construction. You don't want to put somebody in charge of children that don't like children. It's about having the right people in the right places, right? That and believe me, in our community, we got to watch that. All of us have that one in our families, Sister Beatrice Ross, because they will rain on all your ideas but have nothing to offer. That's having the wrong person at the wrong time. That's exactly right, sis. Exactly. Uh, we all have that one, right? That uncle who you can't trust around little children. Why would you let that person stay around the children? Right? Uncle, aunt, whoever it is. We all have those people in our family and we know it and we act like we don't see it and we act like we don't know. We all have those persons and you can't stay here. No, I'm not. You can't babysit. I'm not leaving my children with you. Right people, right time, right? That's why I'm trying to look at my notes. That's why when Elm Grove voted, and by the way, we're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. When Elm Grove voted to move to a church council model of governance, I mean that's making the right move at the right time, putting the right people in place, not just for now, but for 100 years from now if the Lord doesn't return. That's the kind of moves that institutions make. Now, let's say that you are lying on your sick bed. You don't want to have that person to stay at overnight with you in the hospital if all they can do is tell you what's wrong with them and all that they've been going through and all their physical ailments. No, you want that person that knows how to talk to God on your behalf. You want that person that's going to inspire and encourage. You don't want nobody to tell you about their 32 surgeries. I hope I'm making sense. So again, Hezekiah put them in the right place, and our sacred scripture describes it as divisions, service, and minister. Division, service, and minister. And we'll stop at this one. So when we talk division, what we're talking about is the real meaning is to break off and distribute. But for our sake, what we can say is, as we were talking about earlier, that God distributes, separates, and distributes each one of us uh, purpose, and that can be described as what are you good at, right? What is your gift? Where is your passion for God and God's people? Well, God, we can say, kind of being crass, broke that off and gave that to you, distributed that to you. But a second meaning of the word division in the Hebrew word for division is capacity. And so when God gives you a gift, a talent, a passion, something that you can do well, he also gives you capacity, and capacity means to be able to expand in order to receive. We can put that in one word: learn. And so when God sets you, right, when God sets us up, God not only sets us up right now, with right now knowledge or right now skill, right? I know where this screw goes. I can put this screw in place and that kind of thing, or I know how to nail this piece of wood, or I know how to get this data out to you. But God also gives you the capacity to learn, right? So when we're talking learning, now you overflowing gifts. Now you are overflowing talents such that you are doing new things that are founded on the gift that you already have. That's why you see educators who have. Dr. Angela gave this one to me, that educators who master the four walls of the classroom and then are able to take their gifts and their talents outside of the classroom to teach other people or to administer to other people. I thought that was powerful when she said that you can't claim that you're going to teach other teachers until you master your classroom. But God gives us what we need to be able to do so. I hope that makes sense. She was fussing at me about patience, by the way. Division means gift, skill, knowledge, talent, but it also means capacity to learn and overflow your gifts and talents. Second one was service. That's how we work on behalf of other people. That feeds back into what we were just talking about. We don't want people on our team that don't have a passion for people, that want to see people uh, that don't want to see people live better. That's what service is about. I am giving this to you because I want to see you do better. And we all ought to pause right there, right? And thank God for the people that He put in our path as we were growing, as we were maturing, that were gifts of God in our lives, that they served us in manners perhaps that we didn't even understand. We just talked about teachers, the teachers in our lives, right? Who gave us things that we couldn't even possibly pay for, or the neighbors, or the coach, or uh, the Sunday school teacher, whoever it was, right, that wanted to see you do better. So they served you. And it looked like they would crack you over your head if you messed up, but they were really fulfilling a service to you. I hope that makes sense. Last one, to minister. This is that thing. This is when we are doing that thing that we could not let go, even if we wanted to. I mean, it has its grips on us. Somebody might say to you, I don't know why you stick with that girl. I don't know why you pouring so much into that girl. But for you and God, there is something about that girl that is redeemable. And even when you get frustrated and say, I am not fooling with that boy anymore, you still go back because it has a grip on you. That's what ministry is really about. Ministry is about, I couldn't quit even if I wanted to. But Donald Lewis says that person for him was his grandmother. He always wanted to make her smile. Yeah, that's a great example. We all have those people, right? That if it were not for them, we would not be where we are right now. We all have them. So yeah, when we talk about ministering, we're talking about that thing, that person that we couldn't walk away. What made me think about Sister Beatrice Ross? Thank God for their dedication to teach us despite our hard headedness. You sure said that right, sis. You sure said that right. So when I think about ministry, um, forgive me and pray for me if you think I'm wrong, but I think about and Marvin Gaye and the album "What's Going On." You all know that's one of my favorites. I think it is one of the most complete. Uh, I mean, just track after track after track. But the story goes, and perhaps some of you have heard it, that Marvin Gaye stopped going around. His friends, his people didn't see him anymore. So Smokey Robinson took it on himself to go to Marvin's house. And there he found Marvin Gaye sitting at the piano, disheveled, like, he ain't took a bath, all of that kind of stuff. He's just writing music for this album and smoking, this of course is my paraphrase. What's going on with you, man? What's wrong with you? And Marvin Gaye says, I can't let it go. I'm doing this for God. I can't let it go. And if you think about the tracks and the words on that particular album and how it was written probably 50 years ago. Yeah, about 52 years ago. And here we are today. That album still, song for song, line for line, still speaks us to us today. That was straight from God. And he just could not let it go, or it would not let him go. Let's see. Sister Lucille Bazille. Mine was my parents and some of the elder people in my church and in her neighborhood. That's it. People who were just pouring into you, right? And look at you now. And now you're pouring into people. Wonderful testimony, Sister Lucille. Brother, brother, brother. Yes. Yeah. Powerful words, man. So that's it. Let's shut it off right there because I know we're on people's lunch break. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening and participating and taking the necessary notes so that we can come back. We'll be back this evening at 7 for Smart Church Amplified. Promises to be yet another powerful conversation that we learn from each other. Let me give you the announcements. The Neighborhood African American Studies course kicked off on Monday. There were some technical difficulties. We have already worked them out. So if you were trying to get in virtually and did not do so, then please come back. Come back on this coming Monday. We have the glitches worked out. If you don't, you are cheating yourself. It is just a life-changing experience to learn the depths of who we are and who we are in God's eyes. So please try to make sure. Um, our church family gathering is this Saturday at 9 a.m. So please make plans to either join us in person or Miss Arlene will be sending out the Zoom code this coming Friday, as we always do. Choir rehearsal, we're bringing the choir back. Choir rehearsal is on February 14th at 6 o'clock. Try to get you out of here so you can go on your Valentine's date. February 14th, 6 o'clock. The choir is coming back. That's next week. So please help us to spread the word. If people don't even have to be members of our particular church to be a part of the choir. Just remind them that our service is at 8:15, not 8:30. Service starts at 8:15, so they'll need to be here at 8. But we are looking forward to hearing a full choir yet again. February is Heart Healthy Month, so please do those necessary things and get checked and make adjustments and so forth and so on. And don't forget our little sister Carrington Griffin, who is graduating from Spelman College, needs our help in completing her senior project. She needs our financial help in completing her senior project. That's the announcements. Of course, if I forgot something, please put it in the chat box so we will all know. I will see you this evening. As I saw Brother Donald say, please, please be careful. Sickness has been all around me lately. Thank God I didn't get sick, but please be very, very careful out there. I love you. I'll see you this evening. Peace.